Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Gillespie. We are live on location at Sagamore Spirit Distillery in Baltimore, Maryland. We are going to be joined in just a few minutes by Colin Scott, the master blender now for the Last Drop Distillers, longtime master blender at Chivas Brothers. I apologize for the delay, folks. This is the first time we've tried taking all this stuff out on the road, and we ran into some problems with the internet connections and getting the cameras to work. And it was just a fun experience all around. And so I apologize. I am joined right now, just over my shoulder here, and we're going to adjust this camera because of the issues. Brian Treacy, we are socially distanced right now, as the president of Sagamore Spirit. Brian, let's move that microphone in just a little closer so we can hear you. Tell me about Penny's Proof Day, which is what we're going to be doing out here tomorrow.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for having us on. It's always great to see you. Penny's Proof is, the story behind it is, the column still here at Sagamore that makes our whiskey was named by our Whiskey Thieves fans, which is our kind of our loyal followers, if you will, our brand ambassadors, the consumer brand ambassadors. They sign up to become a whiskey thief, and they're kind of the first to know, and they're really close to the brand, and they are very supportive of the things we do. And we ran a contest one time, and they decided to name our still Penny. And so the whiskey coming off of Penny. As you know, we started contract distilling with MGP, but we opened up this distillery in 2017 and taken over production since then. And what Penny's Proof is a chance for the whiskey thieves to follow along with us in the aging process of our Maryland-made distillate. And so we started it last year by releasing a 2.5-year-old Maryland-made product, and we release it in these 3 200 ml packs. And so you get 3 200 milliliter bottles, and we call it sip, share, and savor. And so what you can do is you can sip one now, share one with a friend, and then savor and follow along with us in this aging journey, right? We know good whiskey takes time. And so last year we did 2.5. Tomorrow we're releasing our 3.5-year-old Penny's Proof. We're really excited about what we're seeing, and as far as the aging process and the maturity and the flavors and the complexities already coming out. And so it's just a fun experience for those that are close to the brand to kind of follow along with us, understand and learn about the process of aging, and see that we're getting really, really close, but also understand maybe why it's quite not in a bottle yet.
When might it finally make it to a bottle? Because next year you'll be at 4.5 years.
Yeah, we think we want to be north of 4, so I would start to look for it next year.
And so folks are going to start lining up here before 8 a.m. tomorrow from the Whiskey Thieves, because they're the ones who got the first notice on this, and they'll get to drive through the line socially distanced.
Correct. And
be able to pick up that one bottle. And how much is it going to cost?
Oh, that's a good question, Mark. It costs 1 penny.
The best deal you will find in whiskey, gang. 1 penny for 600 mLs of whiskey, right?
That's right. So it is last year we had them stand out in the cold. This year they're going to get a special treat. It is all curbside, socially distant, so they'll drive through Port Covington. There's some visual experiences they get to learn about, the little updates on Sagamore along the way. They've got a chance to order some whiskey online last night to add to their Penny's pickup as well, but they'll come through in a very social distance, safe way. We'll hand them what they have, and they'll give us a penny for their whiskey.
And you guys will lose money on this.
we will, but we're having a lot of fun with it.
And which is all that really matters, is that you have fun doing it.
That's the best part of whiskey. It's usually just about having fun and being with friends.
I want to give you a chance real quickly to promote the Win a Barrel of Whiskey competition for the folks in the United States, or sort of Win a Barrel of Whiskey.
That's right. Yeah, so right now if you go into local stores, you might see win a barrel of whiskey from Sagamore, or there's opportunities to sign up online and so forth. You can scan with a QR code. So we're doing a giveaway. The idea was to give away an actual barrel of whiskey. And then we quickly learned through a lot of compliance and so forth, that's really only possible in about 2 states. And so most likely the odds of the winner coming from one of those 2 states is highly unlikely. So the winner will really end up getting probably $10,000 cash, which hopefully then they'll turn around and go buy a bunch of Sagamore.
And that's the value, essentially, of a barrel of
Correct.
whiskey. But they also get a trip to Baltimore to visit the distillery, right?
They do. Then we'll bring them when it makes sense. We'll bring them here to Baltimore, because really, for us, the best recruiting tool we have is this distillery right here. Come in, get a chance to experience our team, our hospitality, hear the story about the history of distilling in Maryland, get a chance to learn about our unique distilling process, taste our products, and of course, we happen to have a relationship with a world-class hotel called the Sagamore Pendry, which is a beautiful hotel right downtown Baltimore, and we'll put you up there as well.
Okay, Brian, thanks for joining us. I know you've got to get to bed early tonight because you've got a late night's sleep. You brought a couple of these along.
Yeah,
and these are the same, right?
No, they're not. I brought two different ones. They're both for you. I didn't know how long you'd be out here.
Okay.
Just trying to get a chance to experience a couple of different of our products. What's always interesting about this is the one on the left there, as you can see, a little bit lighter in color, is our signature rye. It's 83 proof. Our take really on Maryland style rye. So it's a
when you hold this for people can see it.
Blend of two straight rye mash bills, one 95% 5, and another one that's 52% rye and 43% corn and 5% malted barley. And we'll blend those two together at about a 2-to-1 ratio, high to low, and proof it to 83 using the spring water from our farm, Sagamore Farm. So really nice, very easy to drink, very approachable, nice rye whiskey, what we really kind of look at as Maryland style. And then right there is just the big brother. That's the Cask-Strength. So everything the same age of the two mash bills, same blend of the two mash bills.
Hold these up so people can see.
Drastically different in color. And that bottle of Cask-Strength right there just happened to be 112.6. So
okay.
So enjoy responsibly,
of course.
But I think it's always fun to see, like, wow, the only difference is water.
Yeah.
And there's such unique experiences each one.
Well, we'll see you tomorrow morning. The webcast that we're doing from here starts at 8 a.m. Same channels, same YouTube, Facebook channels. I think we're going to try to put it on the Sagamore website or the Sagamore social media channels as well. We'll get all that worked out in the morning, but we'll be here for about an hour and a half in the morning. And feel free to join us at 8 a.m. And Brian, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll let you get home and get some rest.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Mark. I appreciate you making the trip down to Baltimore and all that you do for this industry. It's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.
Cheers and happy hour.
Thanks. So we'll move the camera back over here now. As I noted, we ran into a boatload of technical problems earlier today, so I got to admit, I'm ready for this. So, Slanchava. Once again, thank you for your patience, and allow me to bring in our guest for tonight, Colin Scott. Colin, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you very well. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, good evening. Oh, yeah, good evening to you.
And thank you for your patience tonight in joining us and for giving us a few minutes here because we're running a little bit later than usual. But how have you been?
I've been pretty good. I mean, it's very strange times for everybody around the world with COVID and with lockdowns and freedom and then lockdowns. But the great thing is a lot of people, the business, we're still making whiskey, we're still producing whiskey, we're still working with whiskey, and people are still able to enjoy all our beautiful spirits. So, it's good. It's good, but it's not great for a lot of people, I'm afraid.
No, it's not at all. And how have you been coping with the coronavirus? Where are you headed, based up, and where are you holed up these days? Especially given that now all the pubs in, I think, about 11 councils in Scotland have now closed as of tonight.
Well, that's right on. Yes, today they shut down 11 regions, put it on the highest tier, with a view, hopefully, that'll lower the numbers and people will get home for Christmas. But I've been quite fortunate because having retired in the end of June, I was lockdown wasn't really a problem because I'd just been at home and it's been great. And then, of course, the exciting news for me is having retired in June, I've been asked by the Last Drop to join a very small team as a master blender. So it's fantastic. I mean, I thought I was going to hang up my boots, but somebody did mention to me a long time ago that you actually never retire from Scotch. And I guess because I was born into it, it's probably hopefully going to go on to the end of my time. And for me, it's just so exciting to be back with such a lovely little niche specialist team that we have at the Last Drop. It's very exciting. The future is very exciting.
And you have a history with the Last Drop's founders, the late Tom Jago and James Espy, because you worked with them at Chivas Brothers.
Yeah, well, James Espy was our CEO. So, and of course, Tom Jager has been working with James through all the industries for years and years. So it was just fantastic to work with them way back in the 90s. And that was at the time of the introduction of Chivas Regal 18. So we were all sort of a little team together at that time for the launch of 18. And that was, that was a great part of my time at Chivas. And so to leave Chivas and then be called up by James and be offered this great job at the Last Drop. Sadly, Tom Jager is no longer with us. He's here in spirit, obviously, but absolutely
reason, Glass.
He was a wonderful man, and a great lot of wisdom. He was a very, very wise man, and I learned a lot from him in the short time I knew him. So it's just, I just love that family bit, because everything, all my life, it's been family. My father started in the business, and I grew up learning from him. Then I joined Glenlivet family, then the Seagram family, then the Pernod Ricard family, and now here we are with the Last Drop family. So, it couldn't have been a better journey the whole way through. It's been fantastic, and more to come, Mark.
So how did Rebecca and James convince you to come out of retirement? Because this came as a shock to everybody, because when we got the notice that you were retiring this summer, we figured, okay, you never really do retire, but all of a sudden, pow, next thing we know, a month and a half later, you're signed on with Last Drop.
Well, I think it's just it's a small company, it's a small team. And what it is, it's very niche and bespoke and exciting spirits that are released. I mean, James and Tom, they founded the business in 2008. And since then, there's only been 21 releases behind the business. So it is very niche, very special, very limited. And it's all very aged stock. And that's, age is so good. I mean, I'm not of great age, but there we go. That's another story. But no, and so the opportunity to be part of their team, to help take it forward and go into a great future is very, very exciting. And it's very early days now, but hopefully things will develop, and you'll see the fruits of the team's work in due course.
We have a bunch of your friends that have already jumped on a lot, including Rebecca Jago from Last Drop. Billy Layton, glad to hear retirement is only a date in the diary, and your old pal Alan Winchester and your running buddy Sandy Hislop are on board as well, watching us tonight from Scotland.
Oh, Sandy, what a great man he is, And I mean, he came into Pernod Ricard in 2005 into the blending, and at that time I was starting to travel, so he's been looking after the blending pretty much right up until now. And for me, having a great part being a Chivas, to have Sandy there at the helm, all that side of the business with Pernod Ricard is in very safe hands at Chivas. So, good luck, Sandy. Thanks for all your great work as he's been doing. And to
Chris Ratcliffe points out, interesting idea of families. Do you find that when you move on to the next, there's always a warm welcome where you've worked previously?
Well, I just think, it's just so good to work for a family. Okay, they're great big international corporate companies, but it's just so nice to have that little feeling that it is actually a family. It has that little family touch about it. And I think that, I've just been very lucky. It just happened to work that way. I think now probably I would go and look at my next one and make sure it was a family, just to keep the thread going. But it's interesting looking back that it has been a family right from day one in my whole Scotch whisky career.
Let's talk about that career. How did you get started? What got you into the business in the first place? Was it family? Was it just sheer
How
did you get started?
How do I get started? Well, I think I got started subconsciously because my father, he was in the business up in Orkney, where he was running a distillery up there. And so I sort of grew up around that distillery. And my grandfather, he was also in the business in Glasgow. So basically, as you know, grandfather, my father, and myself, the three of us now have well over 100 years in the business, although different companies. And so then of course, growing up in Orkney, it was not the best place. I mean, it's a wonderful island. It's a wonderful place to go and visit, but it's quite tough through the winter. And then, of course, having gone to school and then wanting to, after school, I didn't go to university. I actually did a little bit of accountancy in Edinburgh. So I left Orkney, went to Edinburgh. And fortunately, some of our audits are actually whiskey companies. And so that little bit of whiskey came back into my radar. And I suddenly decided that accountancy was not for me. And so that's when I joined the Glenlivet Distillers in the 16th of April, 1973. And the rest is basically history.
It was all downhill from there, right?
All down. No, it's been a fabulous journey. And the people, it's not only the businesses, it's not only the whiskies, it's also the people and the conviviality who you work with. And then luckily I had a lot of travel around the world. And so I've met a lot of people all over the world. And that's just fantastic to bring your whiskies to them, give them something, see them enjoy it. And in fact, I met you. We had a couple of interviews on a couple of occasions on my travels. I remember them well in New York.
Last time we saw you was the Chivas Regal Altus.
That's right. With Sandy and I were together that night. We had a very good interview with you. Great chat. And then, of course, I think the time before that was was it the Library Bar?
Probably.
Not the Library Bar uptown. And I'd done a tasting for Chivas, and you caught me about 11 o'clock at night.
Well, it's just getting started in New York City, but then again, it is about 4 a.m. class go time.
Yeah, New York never sleeps, so it wasn't a problem. It's always a joy to speak to you, Mark. Always
I have a question from Graham Fraser, and you may not be able to answer this one, but we can take a crack at it. Graham wants to know the history of Last Drop Distillers. James and Tom founded it with one of their partners about 10, 12 years ago, right?
Yeah, 2008. James Espy and Tom Jago decided that because of their love of whiskies, they wanted to take special whiskies bespoke whiskies for people, and what they were searching out was very rare casks that probably were the last casks from that distillery. And so when they bottled that, it became the last drop. So it's right, it's very romantic, I think. Here's the last drop that you'll ever taste from that distillery. But in fact, if you think about it, every cask is unique in itself. So if you bottle a cask, it's always going to be the last drop from that cask. Although there might be other casks from the same distillery, the same make, there will be that little difference because each cask has its own, uniqueness to it. So the last drop, it's just a great name. It conjures up, wow, really what you're doing is you're tasting something really, really special, something really limited, something very bespoke, something very rare, and at the end of the day, something absolutely totally delicious.
Excuse me for just a second here. One of the things I had to do was plug the computer in just to make sure that we don't run out of during this thing. Juggling power outlets out here on the patio at Sagamore Spirit Distillery tonight.
That's good. Oh, you're outside, God.
Yeah,
outside.
Nice, comfortable night. It's about 60 degrees or so, right along the port side here in Baltimore. I'm just glad the weather was good. They've got tents and everything sitting around here for tomorrow, but.
We have about a 25 mile an hour wind, and we've got rain, and it's about 4 or 5 degrees centigrade. There was snow on the hills last night, so winter's coming, which is good. Good. It's good for the natural water, the natural spring water.
You need that.
We do.
Absolutely. Question here from our friend Chris Ratcliffe and colleague. How did you discover that you had blending skills and nosing skills? I've been through the test that Sandy put me through at the blending lab at Kilmallet a few years ago. But how did you get identified as blending talent early on?
Well, in fact, I mean, when I was working for Chivas under Seagram, I was more involved with the bottling side at the early part of my career, and then I got into package quality at our bottling plant just outside Edinburgh. And there, the quality, there was a package quality manager and a spirit quality manager, and there was just the two of us on quality, and we linked into Paisley, our head office. And so, I started to get interested in actually the spirit that was going into all these bottles that we were bringing and putting down the line. And so then in time, the actual blenders in Paisley, they took an interest in me. They called me over, put me through the test, and then I got the invitation to join the blenders. And there I worked with Jimmy Lang to understand all the heritage of the style and the way the blending works for all the products there. And on his retirement, I became the master blender. But what we did have was they have these tests every year on your nose to make sure that it's up to the standard for the blending. And it's a great test, and it's a frightening day, the day of the test. But your nose is what you're given. You get that at birth. You either have a good nose or exceptional nose. Some people have very little sense of smell. It's not a failure if you can't do it. It just means you haven't got the attributes. But if you got the attributes, you've got to pass the test.
But are you born with it, or is it something you can learn? Can you learn to be a good noser?
I believe you're born with it. You're born with a certain level of sensitivity. Because some people have a huge sensitive sense of smell. It's quite a, and in fact, interesting enough, a lot of women, their organoleptic perception is very, very acute. So, and that's why we've got lady women working in the blending around our Scotch whisky industry, which is fantastic.
But I'm wondering, though, if you have the natural organoleptic skills, but you just don't have the flavor descriptors in your vocabulary yet because you haven't learned to associate them, but you have that raw talent, is that something that can be taught to identify, to associate those smells?
I mean, I think the most interesting part of the learning, in fact, even after every day, when we used to sit around the table as a team and just talk about the sample, we'd ask each other what their opinions were. And we all had our own little language that everybody could tune into. And we all had our strengths and weaknesses. So we knew, if somebody said, oh, this is quite buttery or creamy, you knew exactly what they were meaning. There was a sweetness there, and there was a nice sort of mouthfeel. And so you actually learned by, and when something is sweet, is it honey sweet, demerara sugar sweet? Is it, vanilla sweet? There's a lot of sweetnesses. And you just understand from the other members of the team how they try and you all work together. Although you have your own, but it's all understandable. So yes, you do. I think it's like you have your attribute of the nose and your ability. And if you're a whiskey blender, you work with the whiskey flavors. If you work with tea, you learn to get the tea flavors, the perfume, aromas. There's a different language in each of the different categories of tea blending, perfume, whiskey, etc., wine, champagne. I mean, there's a lot of people using their noses around the world to make these great spirits for us all.
We have a question from Robert Mark up the road here in Ellicott City, Maryland. What is the test like? Does it use control samples of certain scents or of whiskey when you're taking that test?
To be quite well, it was a very simple illustration. You'd have maybe 10 samples and one control sample. And what you don't know is how many variants or non-controls are in the lineup. And you've got to find the non-control samples, the ones that don't thing. And you don't know if there's 1, 2, none, or 5, or all of them. So it's quite a it's when you don't know, it's if you know you're looking for 3, you can play around with it and find them and know, well, that's it. But if you don't know there's 3 there, you don't know the number, that changes the whole perception. But you're on total focus and you just work away down the line. Yes, no, yes, no.
I know when Sandy put me through that test, one of the things they did was they ran some gin through there to see if to test it out, to see if the pipes had been cleaned properly, to see if you could pick that up.
All right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, when the bottling halls, it's very important that if there's a change on the line between one and another, you have to be able to pick up if there's any oh God, what's the word? when there's a mixture there. So yeah, I mean, in the course of a blender's life, there's all sorts of different samples and things you gotta be aware of, and just be expectant of them. You may never see them, but they may well, if they come along, you got to be ready for them. And that's part of the excitement. That's why, that just makes it all the more exciting and enjoyable. And also, it's a challenge. And it's always good to have a challenge.
I can imagine it must be a bit of a challenge when you're doing new make samples compared to aged whiskey samples. What's it like when tell me how you go through and evaluate new make.
Well, new make, I mean, what we had actually controls for each of the samples. So it was a case of just playing the samples against the control. But what you're seeing, it's actually fantastic. It was part of the routine sampling, because we did it every week. Because this is the whiskey before it's hit the cask. It's only these are the natural. It's like you born as a baby and you're naked there, and you're not wearing a suit to say you're out of a sherry cask, or a pair of jeans and a t-shirt if you're out of American Barrel or something. That it's you as a naked spirit without any influence of cask, and that's really, to me, that is the true identifier of the whiskies themselves, is actually to see them and nose them and taste them at new. And to me, when I first started in the business, we had dramming around the distilleries and places, and say, the knock would come and you'd head off down into the filling store, and generally speaking, the distillery people, they wouldn't take mature. They loved the new, the clearac. So you get this large measure of 68 or 63% alcohol spirit,
which is why they liked it.
But you had to whack it down in one, and you put a. And if you're lucky, we actually had the water hoses on the way back to our desk, so we could have a glass of water there. But to me, I love the clearac, the new spirit. I find it absolutely delicious. Some people think it's terrible. It's like some fearful spirit, but it's actually, when you look at it and you assess it and you dilute it down to 20 and then assess it, you suddenly see all these characters and aromas and bananas and fruits and raisins and nuts. It's absolutely fantastic. Love it.
And it really is the best expression of the distillery's character, right?
Sorry?
It's the purest example of the distillery's character.
Yeah, that is what the distiller is producing. That is what the distiller is actually making. That's his pride and joy. I mean, he is passionate about it. And that's the great thing about these distillers and master distillers. They have this massive passion for their spirit, and they want to make it great, and we want them to make it great, and that's what they do. And it makes our job as blenders fantastic, because we know that we're going to get great spirit from these great distilleries and great distillers. It's then the important part is to get it into good quality costs, so that then can then take on that new dimension and new character and flavor into the future.
But who has the bigger influence on the whiskey, the blender or the distillery manager and the distiller?
Well, the distiller he creates the spirit to start with, so we then ensure that he maintains that consistency of character and quality. But then, as a blender, when you've got, say, now I've got over 120 distilleries in Scotland, so that's over 120 different characters and flavors. And then if you as a sort of conductor can pull all these different characters and flavors together, you can create, many different expressions of a single malt or a blend or whatever. So, to me, there's a great art in both distilling, and also there's a great art in blending. But it's all down to the spirit and the cask. And then you then get the art to bring those together. That
reminds me of the analogy that I've used a number of times. The difference between blends and single malts is that a single malt is often more like a jazz soloist or a jazz combo, in that it can occasionally be very rough. It can be unique, but when you blend whiskeys, you're creating a symphony. As you made that conductor analogy, you're getting all the various players to play together as one.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a basic blending, it's really harmonizing all those flavors. I mean, there's another way of looking at it from a human point of view. It's like, here you and I are talking, having a conversation. So it's like me talking to a great single malt. Now, if you suddenly got the whole of the Baltimore distillery behind you and had 30-odd people there, male and female, malt and grain, that would be a wonderful blend. And it would be just as great a conversation talking to you as a single malt, or to the whole party as a blend. So to me, the blend is a party whiskey, and yet you can have a lot of fun just with a single malt.
Here's a good question from Dave Kuhn. As the master blender, do you get to make the decision on what ABV a whiskey is bottled at, or do you give the marketing folks different options, or is it all on which one tastes the best? How is that decided?
Well, I mean, the legalities decide we can't bottle less than 40% alcohol for Scotch whisky. The export market, duty-free market, all used to be 43. And now you've got a lot of single malts coming out at cask-strengths, and blends are coming out at cask-strengths. So it's really it's a matter of the marketing and the product you're actually. Because there's always that, you got marketing, you got blending, you've got a lot of people involved in a new product. So it's really that teamwork that comes together, and from that, a decision is made on what the strength will be. But generally speaking, blends tend to be 43% alcohol. But it's a single malts that seem to move around, do a lot of cask-strength expressions, etc. But that's actually coming into blends as well, which is great. I think what we're seeing today is innovation going at 100 miles an hour, and it's fantastic, because there is and it's all about flavour, and the great thing about Scotch, the magic about it's all natural. It's 100% natural. It's cereal, water, yeast, and oak cask. End of story. But what a great story!
Oh yeah.
And the way of the distillation process is unchanged in over 500 years for malt whiskey, and for grain whiskey about 150 years. And yet, the world is changing so fast. Yet this Scotch whisky is right up there. People want it more and more and more. And so for me, I'm coming to the end of my career, but for me, I think that the Scotch whisky is in a very, very strong position. And there's, a huge amount of innovation still to come with new expressions, new additions. The world's the oyster for Scotch, and it's very, very exciting.
Let's do this question from Chris Ratcliffe about who comes up with the idea as the concept for a new blend, and do you find yourself trying to translate someone else's descriptions into the liquid? And let's put this in a case study with the Chivas Regal 18, because I know you worked on that with James Espy and Tom Jago. So let's go through that and how you got the brief for that and how it was created.
Well, the brief was to create the first family extension for Chivas Regal, because we only had Chivas Regal 12, and our competitor Johnny Walker, of course, was getting more and more colours in its portfolio. So we were asked to create Chivas 18, and from a blending point of view, in fact, it's quite an interesting challenge, because what we felt was there were, when people heard there's a new Chivas Regal coming out at Chivas 18, there was an expectation. They would have an expectation of what they thought that might be. So we had to really meet that expectation and hopefully go beyond it. But luckily, the great thing is we had Chivas Regal 12. You have its style, its heritage, and the way it is blended. So it was really a case of taking that style, that heritage, and taking it from 12 to 18. But by selecting a different formula of whiskies was actually to change the taste, make it a totally different taste experience, but still be in that wonderful, smooth, rich, rounded style. So that's really what drove the creation of the flavors and tastes of Chivas 18. It was already, its style and its heritage was already there. It was a case of making the taste just different, but in that same smooth, rich style.
So how do you come up with the brief for the first blend that you're creating for the Last Drop that we'll see at some point next year? How then do you work with Rebecca and the entire team to decide what that first blend is going to be? Because there's an existing blend that's Tom's blend, and I know you've probably tasted it, and I have too, and it's stunning. But it was created by a combination of Charlie McLean and the guys at Ian McLeod. You've got to top that with the first mainstream blended malt for the Last Drop, or blended Scotch for the Last Drop.
Well, it's all about, it's like with Chivas 18, we are we couldn't buy 18-year-old whiskeys. So it was a case what was in inventory, and from that inventory we were able to create Chivas 18. Likewise for the first the signature blend, which is going to be coming out next year. We've already been looking at the casks that they have. They got some fabulous casks, and some will come together, and together we'll have, as a team, we'll produce this wonderful new signature blend for you to enjoy next year.
Okay, Pete Head has a great question here. What is used as the base for blending? Cask strength, or do you knock it down to 40% before you start blending it? When does as Pete Head puts it, when does the watering down take place?
Well,
in the process.
Is that for actually creating a blend?
No, when you're doing the blending in the blending facility, are you taking the cask strength barrels and blending those together straight out of the cask, or do you water them or lower the ABV first to proofing strength?
Well, what we'll do first is we'll get the samples from the cask that we're proposing to blend. We'll nose and assess them to make sure that selection is correct, and that'll be taking the spirit and reducing it to 20% volume to do that assessment. And then once we've done the assessment, made out the formula and the recipe, we'll then blend that at cask strength with samples from those cask strength samples. And once we put that together, we'll then cut that back down to 20 and assess it.
And
And we'll
assess it before and after to make sure there's no influence from the water?
No, because we're using flavorless water.
Reverse osmosis filters, right?
Yeah, we have demineralized water that we use, so there's no flavor. So, I mean, even if we were putting the cask together and the bottling was going to end up as a cask strength bottling, we'd do all our evaluations at 20% volume.
And that was the question from.
We would actually look at it. We would look at it neat as it is at cask strength because that's what it is. But all the actual the heads downs, serious assessment is all done at 20% volume because that's where we feel that that it removes the influence of alcohol and maximizes the release of the aromas and characters.
And that was the question from Tabitha Spirit Bomb. Blenders really do use watered down whiskey down to 30% or 22%, as you point out, 20% even, just to remove that influence, right?
Yeah, I mean that's how I've always done it at 20%. Other blenders may do it at cask strength. They might do it. I mean, it's not a universal rule. I mean, the blender does what he does, but certainly in all my career at Chivas, we did everything at 20% volume, 50-50 for bottle strength. But I mean, other blenders may well do it at different other strengths, and that's it's really what you learn and how you grow up in it, I suppose. But I've always drunk my whiskey at 20% alcohol anyway, so that's how I enjoy it.
And even tonight, the glass you've got there, you've got it down to 20%, right?
Well, that's only a water glass, but I've got another one here, which I'm going to put a little bit of, as you were talking about it, a little bit of Tom's blend, 18-year-old. So just to taste him and have him in the back of my mind as we've talked about him.
Yep. Now, Dave Kuhn asks, do you keep a notebook of cask notes, or do you think when you're nosing a cask, this could use a sherry influence, and go track down a good cask example of that? Let me rephrase the question. When you're nosing cask samples, do you think, this would be really good if we finished it in X, say a PX sherry or a port wine cask or something like that? When you're evaluating casks, do you think this would be really good if we finished it in X?
Well, I think maybe as you're nosing samples and cask samples, a lot of these things go through your mind, and you're always looking for that opportunity to maybe take something and do something with it. And sometimes you see an exceptional cask and you say, well, hey, we're not going to empty that. We can keep that or whatever. So there's no. I think the answer here is there's no fixed rules. It's not a case that you see that you got to do that with it. It's a case of you work around it, and it all falls into place in time. It may be you think you do something, you look at it again, and you think, well, no, I don't have to do that. I'm going to do that instead. So you've always got to keep open and keep the whole thing moving, because sometimes you just don't know what happens when you put two whiskies together. You think there might be a marriage in heaven, and in fact, it's a marriage from hell. But and that's just the great thing about Scotch. You learn. It's a school day every day, and it's just magic. I mean, I've loved my career, and it's luckily it's still going, and especially with the Last Drop, because the castle whiskies they have are wonderfully old, so it's very bespoke, very elite, and of course everything's very limited edition.
Tabitha points out that if she were a blender, she'd end up putting everything in port casks and be fired so fast. What about port casks makes them really special? Because a lot of whiskeys are done in port, but there are very few really great ones, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started in the business, we had one or two port pipes in our warehouses, which had come into Scotland with port and then up into Speyside to be filled up there. So those had a little bit of nice red color, but they're a different shape to the sherry butt, and sometimes they don't go into the rack. They're a bit longer, and they're a bit steeper in the middle. So they're not ideal for a warehouse, for a racked warehouse. So dunnage one's okay. So generally speaking, port casts have sort of faded off, but one or two countries have done. The companies have done port finishes, and it's an interesting little flavor concept it adds to the whiskey.
How much competition is there among blenders? When you talk to somebody like David Stewart or Richard Patterson, do you guys try to one-up each other, or?
No. I mean, what we have with the blenders, it's like with Sam, they just have huge respect. Obviously, in their past lives, but Sam and I talked a lot about lots of things. But with David Stewart, Richard Patterson, I've known them for years, and we just respect each other's work, to the nth degree. And it's not a case of, we've done better than you. It's a case of, well done. I really like what you've done. That's great. It's not a case of one-upmanship. It's just about, we're all in there to make great whiskies. And we just respect each other for each of everybody's contribution to the whole, because at the end of the day, we are representing Scotch whisky. We're representing Scotland. And then of course we're representing our company and our brands, and that's most important. But at the end of the day, it's really about ensuring the magic of Scotch comes from all of us to all of you, for you to enjoy.
Well, let me throw something at you a trick question at you. Outside of Scotch whiskey, what do you enjoy? What whiskeys do you enjoy from outside of Scotland then?
What whiskeys I enjoy?
From outside of Scotland, not Scotch, Irish, Japanese, American. Do you get a chance? Do you drink any?
I do, yeah. The Irish. I love the Irish, but I think Japanese has a little bit of part of my heart. But I love Ireland. I've got a sister over there, so I've been over there many, many times. And just being in Ireland, you just embrace their culture, their whiskey, their people. It's brilliant. And the other whiskies, bourbon. Well, I've had a few. We used to bottle a little bit in the old days, and that I like the bourbon to a certain degree. But no, I think that it's just great. They're in their own right. They're all different, but they're all great. And now Indian whiskey, that's really becoming something very special. So no matter where the whiskey's coming from, everyone's on the quality, they're on the taste, they want to produce the best. And I think that's just a great step forward from, a whiskey's not just a whiskey with a whiskey anymore. It's something, everyone is special, it's unique, and it does. And I think people have got to, to stop. Don't have to add water or not, but preferably add a little water, and just think what you're drinking. What am I tasting? And if you stop and think, it's amazing what flavors you can see. Because in Scotch, you've got all those, the Speysides have those lovely fruits and apples and pears and apricots. And then your bourbons have that little sort of scented rose petal floralness. And then the Japanese has a little bit more sort of a mixture of the fruit and the floral. And then the Irish has that little sort of mouthfeel coatiness about it that makes it very, very creamy, which is great. So they're all there and they're all different. But I just love Scotch. And I'm a big blends man as well. I very rarely drink single malts, and that's been right from the beginning. So I do enjoy malts, but I don't drink them very often.
So have you tried the Last Drop's 1980 Buffalo Trace bourbon?
I have indeed.
I tasted it last night. I'll have my tasting notes for it on the show this weekend. What did you think?
I thought, no, I mean, I thought it was a classic bourbon. It's got a richness. It's very fresh, and then it has that lovely sort of scented floral, and then it comes in a little bit of sort of there was a little sort of toffee towards the aftertaste. No, I thought it was, it really characterized what I call a really, really nice bourbon. Very warming, very rich, and very smooth, very, very drinkable.
And Graham Fraser has asked, what are the rarest casks that Last Drop have acquired? I suspect you probably ought to say what's the rarest casks that Last Drop has bottled, because the ones you have in the warehouse, I'm sure Rebecca will kill you if you tell us what they are.
No, it's like the old blender story. Everything, formulas and recipes are all secrets. But the Last Drop, it's very much an aged whiskey, bespoke bottler. So there's things of great age there, which is very exciting.
But they've done some things with cognacs and rums as well as that one little bourbon experiment.
Well, that's the great thing about the Last Drop. It's not the releases this year is the cognac and the bourbon and then of course there's the rum, the Jamaican rum. So it's not just it's not just the it's not.
If you're reading the comment, Rebecca said yes. We're not going to discuss the
the
warehouse.
It's something I've never disclosed ever. Once you get the bottle and it has an age on it, that tells you what's been going, what's around. But the inventory is the inventory.
So we just had a few weeks ago the record for the oldest bottle of Scotch on record bottled. That the Macallan came out with this 78-year-old that beat the previous record, the Gordon and MacPhail Mortlock 75-year-old. Right. Realistically, how old can we go with Scotch whiskey in the warehouses? How much? I know you probably don't. You probably have at least some ideas of what's out there, but realistically, can we get much older than 78, maybe 80?
Yeah, well, they've already managed to do that. So there's a way. There must be a way. Yeah. But generally speaking, there's things you can do, but you always got to remember the angels, a very big part of the age part, and aging. It's as I understand aging is that when you put the new spirit into the cask, that has a flavor profile and it goes into that cask. And then what the cask you're in actually will put another flavor profile into that flavor pot. So on day one, you've got a flavor pot. And as the years go by, the angels take away 2% every year, and the cask gives flavor into the spirit, and that keeps happening all the time. So what happens is that pot that started as new, with its original flavors, intensifies as it gets older and older and less. And I think that is the wonder of aged whiskies, is that intensifying of the flavors in time. And you can only do that naturally, and the angels do help themselves to quite a lot of the spirit. But it's a very important part of maturation, because the minute you stop the angels share, like if you put it into a bottle, it doesn't change thereon. So you have to do that. So, I'm not quite sure how they actually got to 75 and whatever it was, 85, but 65 and 85, but who knows? But at the end of the day, we have a very strict rules of what we do and how we do it. And so it can only be done naturally. That's the only way it can be done.
One question a lot of blenders get is, if they have a favorite single malt to put into their blends. But Graham Fraser asks if you have a favorite grain whiskey for your blends.
Yeah, it's interesting, of the sort of 7, 8 grain whiskey that there are. I mean, there were a lot more. They are actually very individual in their own character and flavour. And I suppose Dumbarton was a lovely little light. It was the lighter. If you like the lighter ones, you'd have things like Dumbarton or Girvan. If you liked a little bit more depth, you probably have things like Strathclyde, which is a little bit more meaty, or Cambus or Port Dundas, Invergordon, and then of course you've got North British in Edinburgh, and they're all different. They all bring their own attributes to a blend. But I think I don't know. I like them all really. They're just a very easy whiskey to drink, but they do have a lovely that sort of sweetness they all have. That vanilla sweetness is sort of the hallmark of grain whiskey.
I love a good single grain whiskey in the summertime with maybe an ice cube, because it's a little bit lighter than a lot of the single malts. And just on a hot summer day, I think a single grain is a good choice. And a lot of people, though, you make a really good point here, because a lot of people think single grain is single grain, and Cambus is going to taste like Port Dundas, is going to taste like North British, is going to taste like Strathclyde, and that really isn't the case here, is it?
No, it's not. They've all got their own characteristics. You almost get a banana flavour out of Strathclyde. You've got lovely floral flavours from Girvan. So they all have their own different attributes. But as you say, put an ice cube in there, add a little bit of maybe a little sparkling water, and nice fresh. And it has flavour. Grain whiskey's got its own flavours. A lot of people are surprised. And when you get a very old grain, I mean, that got a lot of character and flavour. So yes, grain is not just it's not just some. I mean, in the old days, they all thought it was just to bulk up the blend. It's not. It actually plays. It has a contribution, because you change the malt to grain ratio, you'll change the balance, you'll change the final flavour. So it has a very important role to play, and they are delicious. But it's quite interesting. You can actually get people who think a grain is of single malt, because because there are some lighter single malts, and you can actually, people think, oh, it's a lovely single malt. Say, no, it's actually a grain whiskey.
And Whiskey Canuck asks from Canada, do you typically only use one grain whiskey in a blend, or would you use combinations of grains just like you do with the malts?
Well, that's another sort of secret of the blender, is that I mean, well, one answer there, you could say you don't necessarily put all your eggs in one basket. But I mean, some blends work well with a single grain, others work well with a blended grain. So it's really at the end of the day, you work out whether the malts and the grains you use in a blend all works together to actually make that end result. And you can work the parameters however you wish to make that result.
Do you have, and I'll make this the last question, or next to last question, and this is one I'm sure you've been asked a few thousand times, but do you have a favorite blend that you have at home, or do you have your own bespoke blend at home that you make for yourself?
Well, that does happen now and again, the little bespoke one, but generally...
I asked Jim Beveridge this question, and he does not. So I'm just curious, do you have make up a blend for yourself?
My wife loves her whiskey, and we sort of have a little bit of play around, and so we do a few little blends here and there. But I mean, the majority of my life has all been Chivas, and Chivas 18 is very much the sort of the later dram, but a Chivas 12, I'll actually have Chivas. What I have to do is when the cocktail started, they produced a Chivas Cooler, which is Chivas 12 and ginger ale. And I just find that, instead of a gin and tonic, a Chivas and ginger ale is just a great whiskey. But so I tend to head for that one. And I'm a blends man anyway. But I have got a little penchant now, having with Scapa coming into the portfolio in 2005. And because I'm an Orcadian and grew up and was born there, I mean, Scapa is very much. So my desert island, I'd have my Chivas, but I'd have my bottle of Scapa in there as well. But what I have tonight, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is Tom's #1 blend. So, and I've got that in a nice glass here with the water. So it's really, that's what I'm enjoying talking to you with at the moment, Mark. Thank you.
Well, before I ask my last question, let's ask one from a listener here. How often do you nose your competition to see what they're coming up with? How often do you nose the other guys?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yeah, we keep a close. Historically, we've always kept an eye on the competition to see what, see what's in that category, what they're doing. But I mean, the rate of people doing innovations and things is, it's quite hard work to keep up with everybody. But that's a great thing, and especially, this with the social media now, it's a great platform for distillers and blenders to showcase their products and companies to showcase their products. Because here we are, we're talking to however many people around the world or around America. It's fantastic.
All over the world. A lot of our listeners are in the UK right now. We've had people from New Zealand, Australia, all over the world watching tonight.
It's fantastic. And, it's something that when I started, our only our communication was a telex, or a telephone, and that was it. And now here we are at the touch of a button. We're all talking together around the world, and it's just fantastic. And that's why it's so exciting when there is all this innovation for us as whiskey makers to give and take to the world. And that's why, when I got the opportunity to join the Last Drop, here's another chapter to bring more innovation into the world from the Last Drop. So for me, it's just so exciting. The future is very, very exciting. And I'm really honored to be part of the Last Drop team. It's fantastic.
So, final question. You mentioned earlier that you acknowledged that you're in the twilight of your career. How do you want to be remembered 50, 60, 100 years from now when they write the history of this era in Scotch whiskey? How do you want to be remembered?
That's a difficult one. I mean, I hope. I think what is Scotch really? It's a very comforting. It's a very warming. It's a very friendly. It's a very convivial drink, and I think that when people drink a whiskey that's associated to me and they smile, I hope that I'm remembered for making lots of people smile when they drink that whiskey. And in fact, I hope they smile when they drink other people's whiskeys as well. But it'd be nice to know that I've made people smile when they drink my whiskeys.
Well, I know that you've made me smile many times over the years, and Colin, thank you so much for your time for the last hour or so. Cheers, my friend, and hopefully we'll get to see each other and share a dram in person one of these days when the pandemic gets past us. But Sláinte.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for this great opportunity to talk to you again and meet you again, because we've had great chats in the past, and I hope, this is not the last one. Although I work for the Last Drop, this is not the last drop.
Oh, no.
So thank you very much, and thanks to all your listeners.
Wait a second. Before I let you go, because Leighton just popped in with this one. Colin, you've come a long way from being the social secretary at ISC. You want to explain what this is?
Well, we used to, the judges of the International Spirit Challenge, where Billy Leighton was one of those, and there's Richard Patterson, John Ramsey, David Stewart, and we used to have an AGM every year, and that used to be a different, and we go to different parts of the world, and so I had to host one of those. But in fact, Billy Layton, he actually was a very good social secretary for the ISC for Irish distillers at that time. But we had a lot of fun, and I think that's very much the last drop sort of buzzword. It's fun. Whiskey is fun, and I think that's really what I hope people get from whiskey, is that they have fun with whiskey. They have good conversations, good discussions, and just enjoy that wonderful, wonderful golden liquid.
I've always said the best investment you can make in whiskey is to drink it with good friends and make good memories.
Absolutely. I'll drink to that.
After the bottle is gone.
Yeah, and also to absent friends.
To absent friends, yes. We got a lot too many of those these days. Thank you, Colin. Take care of yourself. Take care of that cough, and we'll talk again very soon, I hope.
Well, great. Many thanks to you, Mark. It's been a pleasure. And thank you, everybody, for listening. It's been a pleasure.
And I will, just a few final thoughts here just before I call it a night. Thank you again to our hosts at Sagamore Spirit Distillery for inviting us to come down tonight. And we will be here again tomorrow morning, getting up early morning wake-up call, 8 a.m. live webcast as they release Penny's Proof. Once again, as we heard about that, if you missed any of this, you can catch the replay on our YouTube channel later on. But we'll be back on these same channels at 8 a.m. in the morning from here at Sagamore Spirit. Hopefully with the internet problems resolved, and we will get everything working back together again. Until we meet again, well, just a quick hint. Next week, we will have our regular Writers Roundtable. Margaret Waterbury, who has a brand new book out on tasting Scotch whiskies, will be joining us. We'll also be joined by our pal Chris Ratcliffe and other guests as well for the Writers Roundtable week. We will be working on Black Friday weekend. Sorry, guys, but got to figure you got to have something to do to get you through the Black Friday holiday. And we'll have a brand new episode of WhiskyCast this weekend as well. Hope you can join us for the webcast in the morning. And until we meet again, I'm Mark Gillespie, live tonight at Sagamore Spirit Distillery in Baltimore, Maryland. Sláinte, take care of yourselves, wear your masks, and we'll see you soon. Good night, everyone.